Tensions between China and Japan are flaring up again over the disputed Diaoyu Islands. This comes after China sent 8 ships to the region on Tuesday. Japan's prime minister responded by saying Tokyo will expel by force any Chinese landing on the islands. Joining me now to discuss the dispute in the East China Sea is Sheila Smith from the Council on Foreign Relations. She's a senior fellow in Japan Studies. Sheila, thanks for joining us. You know, it seems for the first time that Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe used the word force when talking about the recent movements over there. Do you think Japan will actually go through with any type of force, or do you think it may pull back depending on the backlash it could receive from other countries?
Well, I think it's a complex problem. Clearly, sentiments in both countries have escalated since last year. Now there's patrol vessels from Japanese as well as Chinese agencies in Senkaku waters. And I think the real concern, I think, for the Japanese government is that there will be a landing, an official landing by the Chinese government on the islands. And that will complicate, I think, the ability of the two governments to try to de-escalate the situation. So my sense is that the Prime Minister wants to be very clear that basically telegraphing to Beijing, please don't cross this line because I will have to respond. Now, force is a hard word to understand. You know, is that military force? Is it the Coast Guard will respond? Is it the Japanese police will respond? I think the reality is the Japanese government will have to respond. And so if a Chinese vessel, a Chinese government vessel in particular, decides that it wants to land officials on the island, the Japanese will have to respond. And that will probably be the Coast Guard or the police. And I think at all costs, I think probably the Japanese government is hoping that that will not come to pass.
Well, what happens here? Because, you know, you have a region that is still in high tensions over what's happening with the DPRK. Right. So can you talk about which country could be in the best situation or position to perhaps diffuse the tensions with Japan?
Well, the dispute clearly is between China and Japan. So those two countries really must come together to talk about how to manage this dispute and how to de-escalate these tensions. I think Washington also is very concerned and would like to play a larger role in encouraging that kind of resolution. At the end of this week, both Chinese and Japanese officials may be meeting in Beijing to talk about sort of crisis communications, the hotline. How do we manage this dispute in a way together that we don't allow these kinds of incidents or perhaps miscalculations to bring us to a place where we actually have a clash between officials from both sides. So I think that would be the best solution, the bilateral management kind of together trying to de-escalate, come up with a common way of communicating to prevent the kind of tensions that are flaring at the moment. Beyond that, I think Washington has been very clear. Secretary Kerry, as you know, was in the region, spoke to governments on both in Beijing as well as Tokyo. So I think the United States would be very happy to play a supporting role in mediating, or at least in advising a way of de-escalating the tensions. But once you de-escalate, then the diplomatic conversation really has to take place between China and Japan about how to have a more permanent resolution of this dispute, so that they're not always vulnerable to these kinds of escalating tensions and real anxiety about the use of either military force or some other kind of incident escalating to that level as well.
All right, Sheila Smith, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate your time on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.